I'm Sandra Ouaiss. I used to be a drama buyer for Canal+, and I know Dominic's work because I used to buy Robin Hood, a series he created for Canal+. Let me briefly introduce you Dominic before we see a trailer. Dominic has worked on 3 hit series. The first one was Hamish Macbeth. And then he worked on Doc Martin, that you might know because it has been adapted in France for TF1. And then he created Robin Hood. So I think maybe the best way is to see video clips of his works.
It was a very interesting experience to see those ancient clips from very old shows, some of which I don't remember writing. But my 17-year-old son took on the task of choosing the clips that were his favourites from my work. And he did it at 3 o'clock this morning, so I had to trust him. I'm not sure I would have chosen those particular clips. But you should, I think the moral is you should never let a 17-year-old loose with Final Cut Pro.
It was perfect.
I'll show you later a professionally cut clip of something that is coming up next from my production company, so that you don't think everything I did was in the 1970s.
So we have seen clips from Robin Hood that has been created in 2006, which is the best selling drama for BBC worldwide. We also saw clips of Doc Martin, which won the best comedy drama at the British Comedy Awards, and we also saw clips from Hamish Macbeth that has been created in 1995. Dominic, would you like to comment those images? Would you like to tell us what have been your role working on those different series?
Yes, they aren't the only things I've worked on, but they are the things I remember most, and they are the series, so they linger in the memory more. And I was the script editor of Hamish Macbeth, which, as you saw, is this microphone working? Everybody can hear me? Not great. A bit louder? That better? Yes, okay. So I was the script editor of Hamish Macbeth, which is the show that you saw starring Robert Carlyle, who went on to become a superstar and was in Train Spotting, and we had him first, and we were very pleased to have him. And I became a writer on that show. We had 6 episodes commissioned by BBC, and I had been at home trying to be a writer for some years and failed, and managed to get this job script editing with a producer. I'd been working as her assistant on a series before that called 99, no, it wasn't called 1991, it was called Firm Friends. And we worked together on that show, and we became firm friends. And as that show was finishing, Hamish Macbeth was starting up, and by then she trusted me with scripts, and I became the script editor, and I had some ideas for how the series should go, and some episodic ideas, and so I became a writer and script edited my own scripts. And the show was a big hit in the UK at the time. It's a comedy drama, as you would have realised, and they're few and far between in the UK as they are elsewhere. And then I went and did Hallmark for a while, did some writing and rewriting for Americans. I wanted to do something again in the UK, I think partly because when you go out for dinner and people ask you what you do and you say you're a writer, they say, is it anything I know? And if you say I've been doing something on the Hallmark channel in America, it's not a very good dinner party opener. So I was approached by Martin Clunes and his producer wife to write Doc Martin. And so I wrote and created that show and did 2 series before handing it over. And then I wanted to create my own production company, but I was approached by the BBC and Tiger Aspect, an independent in London, to do Robin Hood. And I didn't want to do it because I had decided I was going to create my own business, but they persuaded me, so I went to do that. And I'm very glad that I did.
Congratulations. And then recently you created your own production company, Island Pictures. My first question is, did you feel it was necessary for you to have your own company? How does it help you as a writer?
I've got a long answer to this written down, but it feels inappropriate to read from a screen in a nice intimate audience like this. So I always wanted to run my own business. I think it suits some people. I started out in production and commercials, and I'm as interested in the business side of production. I think it's creative. So I don't see the distinction between writing, sitting at home on your own and writing. It seems to me it's just an extension of that creativity to be part of the production. So decisions about your production model, where are we going to be based, whose money are we going to take, who are we going to cast, all of those decisions, which are standardly the province of the producer, actually are really important to you as a creator. And if you don't mind being in the room with money conversations, which I don't, I embrace that. It's just logical to have your own, to be a producer and to have your own business.
Okay, it's a logical evolution. And how would you define the role of a showrunner? I know you have been a showrunner for Robin Hood. Before that, you were a writer on Doc Martin. How do you, what's the difference between the 2 roles? And does the role of the showrunner have been generalized in the UK? Is that more common now?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start with the first part of that. In fact, I think I will read this from my, or get my cues from my notes that I made on the way here, because the answer's a bit long. I've got 5 points to make about what is the role of a showrunner. And the first thing is to say that there are no rules, because there isn't yet, certainly in the UK, an established culture of show running. There are actually relatively few examples of a writer running a show. Perhaps the obvious one is the reboot, the reviving of Doctor Who by Russell T Davies. I don't know if you are familiar with Doctor Who. And then there's Stephen Moffat, who's taken over from him, who was also doing this brilliant Sherlock, which you must know.
The 2 shows are aired in, being aired in France.
And there are ongoing shows, soap operas, which are where we've tried to create a kind of senior semi-producerial status for a writer in the UK. But I'm more interested in the 13-part model, the model where you start with nothing, you hit the ground with nothing, and you need a writer to come in and sort of take charge and make the key initial decisions. And the second point is to say that there are, in probably all these cases actually, there's when you've got a writer-producer, you've also got a producer-producer. So alongside Russell T Davies, you had Julie Gardner, who was on the staff of the BBC. And when I did it, I had Foz Allen working alongside me, and he was on the staff of Tiger Aspect. And that puts everybody, that combination of writer, producer, and producer puts everybody in their comfort zone. And now I've lost my notes, I don't know what I'm going to say now. And then what's the third point? The third point is is the obvious question is, if you've got a producer, why do you need a writer-producer? And I think the answer is that the broadcaster and the other stakeholders want a consistency of quality. So they know that one writer can't, on a short lead time, write a series of 13 episodes. But they wish you could. They wish that writer could write them all. But given that they can't, you know, what's the next best thing? You know, so I mean, the issue is, if you've got one script and you like that script, or you've got two scripts and you like them, will they all be that good? And if the scripts are good, will they sound the same? Will there be a continuity of voice? And if all the episodes are consistent in quality and voice, will there be an interesting series arc? Will there be one person responsible for delivering a story across typically a 13-part run? And that's when it makes sense to put one writer in charge of all of that. And that it becomes an attractive proposition for the stakeholders. And my fourth point is, you could stop there actually. If you're just concerned with consistency and quality and someone to take charge of the series arc, you only need a lead writer. You don't actually need a showrunner. But what happens is, when you get a writer with that level of involvement, connection with the material, and someone who's become a key plank of the decision to commission that series, they will then want to be doing more on the show. They won't want to just be a lead writer, because they'll be saying, well, why have you made the decision to film in Budapest? You know, actually that means I've got to write a different show, because you've got, you know, you can't get enough, I don't know, you can't, the locations are different. We've got to think how we're going to make the show now, or you can't, this actually happened to me, is you can't have non-speaking, or you can't have you know, one-line parts, two-line parts, because there aren't people who can speak good enough English. So do you want to ship someone to Budapest and put them up overnight, and then maybe not use them that day because you've changed the schedule for one or two lines? The answer is no, you don't. So you end up writing your core cast speak, and then you have people who should say something, but oddly don't. And you need to be part of that decision and buy into it from the beginning, because, mostly because you are the one who has to work around it. And I think it's about temperament. I think it's about some people wanting it, some people don't. And I know some people who like to complain about producers, but wouldn't really want to do it. They just want to, you know, they become professional moaners. And actually that's fine, because they're not saying, you know what, get out of the way, or let me sit next to you, because I want to do the producing with you too. It's just a way of being, but I do want it, because I think, as I said already, production is creative, and the choices about where you shoot, and the key crew, what your production model will be, how you design the production around the writing. Those directly impact on the creative aspects of the show. And that's just at the beginning. I know you wanted to ask me about that, but I think that one of the key advantages of being a showrunner is that while the show is running, you can adapt. I mean, it's obvious, but it doesn't happen very often. So, for instance, when I was writing Doc Martin, and the first series, I wrote it all, I was mostly in London while it was filming in the countryside in Cornwall. So I wasn't reacting to the rushes coming in, not really. I wasn't really reacting to the cast. When there was a problem on the day, I couldn't adapt.
I understand. It's a question of better control.
Yeah, it's just about being there. I mean, it's impossibly hard. Mm-hmm. So I glued myself to this guy who was my producer, and we were thankfully very good mates. But we literally went to the toilet at the same time.
Yes.
Because if one of us went on our own and the meeting carried on, when the other one came back, we would have to say, hang on, let me just explain what we just discussed. So it just became more time economic to go and do our wee-wees together. And actually carry on talking in the loo. You know, that you just have to make the decision to be there. But what's tough about it is we would do these really long days, often, you know, leaving home at 4 a.m. in the morning to get to Budapest at 11, do a full day of meetings, finish it, you know, the way you do when you work in production in the night, and go home dog-tired and just about manage to get into bed and get up again the next morning at 7 o'clock. And we do that, and we'd share a car into the studios. And my colleague would say to me, "So, how's the script going?" And I'd say, "Well, we've been everywhere together apart from the last, 6 hours where we had some sleep. Did you think I was going to be writing in bed?" And he would think I would be writing, but so you're doing two or three jobs concurrently, and it's not for the faint-hearted. But hang on, I've got more points because I want to get this bit right. I won't refer too much to my screen, but this I want to get right. I think that's what I've described to you is perhaps obvious, and it's the official way of looking at it. But the commissioners and stakeholders, that's the other people involved in the financing usually of the show, they want quality. And the showrunner is a useful and, as we said, logical addition to the production, and that's the official view. But I think my last point is that there is another way of looking at this. Commissioners and stakeholders are scared of commissioning a long-running series. The showrunner assuages that fear, and it gives them someone to call, complain at. It gives them someone to blame.
It's the key person.
It gives them a whipping boy. And the showrunner may or may not be a useful hand on the production's tiller, but being across the writing, hiring, production, delivery, all of that stuff, sure as hell massages his ego. And I think the cynical view, there's the official and the cynical view is actually that showrunning is simply a collision of fear on the part of the commissioners and stakeholders and the megalomania of the writer. I don't know.
It's a good way of summarizing the point. Thank you. And could you describe us the creative process? Maybe you could differentiate when you are a showrunner and when you're just a writer. I mean, how much are you involved in the creative decisions? Do you choose the director? Does the idea comes from you, from the producers? Do you go to see the broadcasters? How does it work concretely?
Well, I mean, the answer is when you're showrunning, when I'm showrunning anyway, I do everything. So yes, I choose the director and the cast and everybody, but we missed a bit. I didn't answer your question about how common it's becoming to be a showrunner in the UK. And I don't really know the answer to it, but I think it's certainly much discussed. I think in the long run, the answer is yes, it will become more common. I think we may be having a bit of a wobble because of the economic crisis, and that's made commissioning a little bit more parochial and a little bit more careful. But I think in the long run, in the struggle for quality, volume matters because it gives you economies of scale, it gives you, you can attract more talent if you've got 13 parts and maybe next year 26, and maybe the year after that 39. That's a lot of work to be offering an actor or a brilliant cinematographer or a fantastic designer. So you can start to have conversations where you're getting better people to come to work. And obviously, you get economies of scale, so you can build a better set of locations, build bigger sets, spend more money on sets because you're amortizing the cost across, you hope, 26 hours or 39 hours.
Yes, it's a question of volume.
It's a question of volume and quality. And also because national broadcasters are having budget problems, but they still want quality, what happens is you need then to top up your money with co-production, international sales. And if you're going to do that, you need a product which is viable on the international market. And that means volume 2, you know, typically an American season, which is not historically what we do in the UK. We tend to do, when I started, a 4-part series was a great gig, but it's useless in the international scene. A 6-part series was a long run. And partly we did them that way because we had a tradition of writers coming from the theatre who, if they did condescend to write a television show, would expect to write it themselves. So to write 4 episodes is quite a big job. To write 6 is a very big job, and beyond that, you know, if you've got a commission to deliver a show to show next year, beyond 6 is not humanly possible, really. You're going to start to need other people writing, and so this is why you need a different system.
But now it changed. You have a common, the orders that you have from the broadcasters are of minimum 13 episodes. At least this is what you had on Robin Hood.
This is what we had on Robin Hood, and I expect there to be more. I think there's been a bit of a blip because of the recession. There are some examples, but not as many as you would have thought, given the market conditions and the obvious sense in doing it.
So what is the usual number of episodes commissioned by an English broadcaster?
Well, at the moment it's very highly varied. We're trying all kinds of different things, different ways. So stripping across 5 days, so you might write a 5-episode serial, which would go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You would be very lucky in the market today to come out of a broadcaster's office with a commission for 6 hours.
Wow.
It's almost unheard of, actually, to come out with an out-of-the-box order for 13 of something with no pilot, nothing. So we were very lucky on Robin Hood because we could plan immediately.
And Doc Martin, the season was of 6 episodes, or?
The first season was 6 episodes.
Yes.
Then I think the next year was 8.
Uh-huh.
And that's a show. It's interesting because I think there are probably quite a lot of people in the audience. I'm going to turn this way because I haven't shown my face to you people over here. There are probably a lot of people like me who would kill for any commission and would never turn down business. But actually, Doc Martin is a show in the UK, which I think I'm right in saying that the broadcaster would have as many episodes per year as Martin Clunes, the actor, and his production company would like to give them, but they don't like to give them very many episodes. They will do 8 sometimes, and then sometimes they take a year off. And that's partly a function of the village in which they shoot. The people there don't love being overrun by television crew. And I think they get tired, and I think Martin, as an actor, would quite like to be available for other shows sometimes. He doesn't want to be seen only as someone who does this comedy, which is now in its 7th or 8th year. So it's quite ironic, and you know, I think if I had a show and the broadcaster wanted it, I would make it every single year, every episode they wanted. But maybe they're wiser than me.
Thank you. And Dominic, could you let us know how much the English broadcasters are involved in your work? Do they usually intervene a lot on the writing work?
Yes, there's quite a bit of back and forth. There's a marked difference between the BBC, which is the state, as you know, and the ITV, which is the other big contender.
Private.
ITV runs a very small commissioning team, and therefore they can't micromanage you. And the BBC has more bodies, and they're more, I would say they're more, what's the word? Better choose me, being filmed. More interested in the script. But I think that it's one of those things that bothers you a lot when you're young. Who's going to say what about your script? But actually, and you know, what will the broadcasters think? Will they say it's all right? But actually, as you get older, I think you care more about what you think and what the audience thinks. And actually, the difficult thing in making a show, and not just the writing, is all the stuff, everything. It's all the politics. It's, will this actor actually play the part the way you want them to play it? I was remembering last night, because we saw a great actor I love, who was in Robin Hood, on the telly, and we were very pleased to see him. He hadn't been on the telly for a long time, and he was very good. But I remembered that he refused to say, because Robin Hood was a comedy. I don't know if anybody necessarily realised that, but he had his he had his catchphrase, and he said it brilliantly, but he got fed up with it and refused to say it and started trying to work around the line. And because we would have a director to come and do a block of 2 or 3 episodes, the director might not really have realised and say, okay, you've sort of said the line, but it wasn't actually the line that is the catchphrase, and then the kids in the playground can't enjoy the repetition of the line, and you know, then you've got to go and have a chat with that actor and try and make them feel that they are actually being creative and good when they repeat a line that they've said 3 times in the last 2 episodes. And so actually what's hard about making a show is all the stuff, the politics, the man management, the weather, somebody having an accident, the budget, the time running out, you need pickups. What's hard is to get your vision on the screen because of all these 1,000 different things that are going on. And only one of those is the commissioner saying, not really sure about episode 7.
Yes, and you mentioned the budget questions. Regarding budget, could you let us know what is the part dedicated to the writing on a budget production in the UK, generally speaking?
Yes, you asked me about, I think you mentioned percentages.
Yes, percentages.
And is that how you do it here?
Yes, it could be.
That sounds really good. We don't do percentages. We do, the way it works in London is there's a writer's rate per hour of television, which may be, say, £20,000, which is an hourly rate, and then there'd be typically residuals or a buyout of residuals of, say, 100%, 115%, which would effectively double the writing fee.
Okay.
And it does directly bear upon the business of show running, because show running, part of the job, whether you like it or not, is rewriting, muscling in on somebody else's script. And then you have the thorny issue of the credit. And because the residuals, obviously, particularly if they aren't paid up front, go to the person who's credited. If somebody's script isn't used or is messed with, then they may not get their residuals. So, and if somebody is cut off, if you think about it as a writer, I don't know how many writers there are. Are there many writers here? A few, yeah, there are a few. Well, the way it works in the UK is you would, I can't remember, 50% for your first draft, and then set of revisions 75%, and then 100% on acceptance by the producers of your script. If for some reason your script is good and it's usable-ish, but you're being cut off, you might only have been paid, so in the example I've given, say £10,000. Then if I come along and I say, thank you for your script, I'm going to finish it off. You might have been thinking, you might have told your wife or your husband that you were earning £50,000 pounds, 40-something thousand pounds, suddenly you're looking at 10 or 15. That's a very, very hard conversation to have. I don't know why I'm picking on you to look at somebody else. That's a hard conversation to have with a writer when you are a writer and you don't want to hurt anybody else's income. So there are different ways of addressing that, and I think as the system of showrunning becomes more mature, we'll find better ways of dealing with it. I mean, principally paying people some money. Obviously in America, there is more money in the pot. There's money to come to work. And there's a different understanding that goes along with that in terms of your expectation about a need for every word that you've written to be in the script and for you to be the sole credited writer. In the UK, that stuff really matters. So we need to change our system of payments if we're going to really make showrunning work in the UK, and I'm sure that will be true in other countries in Europe too.
Yes, that's for sure. And continuing on this comparison with the United States, how does it work in terms of schedule, the decision that the broadcasters take? Do they take those decisions at the same moment, like in the United States, or not?
Do you mean a pilot season?
Yes.
Or, no. Basically, no, it's chaos.
It's like elsewhere in Europe.
Yeah, it's there's slots to fill. What are we going to put in here? Oh, you've got a project. Is it a good idea? Can you deliver it? That's partly better. You've got a showrunner. Okay, go. And could you please deliver it quick? I think what's more interesting, in a way, is, you know, what we should be thinking about is how do we deliver a show year in, year out? Mm-hmm. And that's where, because it seems to me even in America, actually, particularly if you go HBO, or, you know, they will commission a show when they think it's right. You know, not when it suits the pilot season.
Yes.
And I think what, you know, just because of the way, how long it takes to shoot 13 parts, what will standardly happen is this. So you will get your commission for the first series sometime in the autumn, September, October, November. Then you argue about money and you go and find someone else to put lots more money in and do all these deals. And then, but by then you've started writing and spending money and hoping to God it all comes together. Otherwise somebody gets a big, big bill. And then you do your casting and crewing up and lots of creative decisions that's really, really hard and stressful. We did a tour of Europe to decide on where we would shoot. And then you decide you're going to shoot with these guys and they're going to be your service company and someone has to go and do the deal with them, and is the tax deal for real? And let's go and kick the tires of the guy who's going to be our service provider. Is he really kosher? All that goes on. Then you start shooting, and you've got years and years away is the other end of that. It just feels like it's the long summer holidays, and you can shoot, and it's going to be great. And then suddenly you realise that you've shot one episode and you're arguing, because the first episode is so critical. Everybody's arguing about it. It goes on for months, the cutting, reshooting, God knows what. Then suddenly, September is arriving. And if you've got a 13-part series that's going out in a defined season, i.e. in the autumn, it's going to go out sometime in September. And then the next week, episode 2 is going to go out, and the next week, episode 3 is going to go out. And so what happens is, as you're getting towards the autumn, you're shooting faster and faster. Your post-production goes from months for one episode down to 3 weeks, to 2 weeks, 10 days, until the episodes are on air, episode 11 and 12 are on air, and you don't know that you're going to have episode 13 in time for it to go, and it goes out just in time. If you're going to get the job done for next year, whilst all that's happening in September, you need to be recommissioned. But you can't be recommissioned because the show hasn't gone out yet, yeah. Or maybe one episode has gone out. Is this obvious to everybody? Yeah.
Yes. So you lose 1 year.
Well, you don't lose a year, but what happens is you can't afford to lose. We couldn't afford to lose a year. So what happened is we started trying to commission scripts even though we didn't have any green light, didn't have any money. And the broadcaster's waiting to see what the ratings are like, and nowadays it's all about the social media as well. And you're trying to get the next show going whilst doing the publicity and all the press, and do the deals for season 2 with the cast and the crew, and trying to get ahead with scripts before they're green lit, at a time when you're the most tired you will ever be in your life. And then so it just happens all over again. So, you know, what you need to be is commissioned before your show's gone out.
Yeah.
The holy grail is to get a 2-year commission. Then you can really build some sets, because you know you've got 2 years of... I mean, it's as rare as hen's teeth. Can you translate that?
No.
I think it's very rare.
C'est très rare. Okay. You have to wait until your first season is broadcast, usually before you know if the broadcaster is going to commission for a second season. Okay. Could you let us know if we know that Doc Martin has been adapted in France, but not only in France, in Spain also, and in Germany, I think. Were you involved in the creative process abroad or not? How far were you? Did you go on that?
You've forgotten Russia.
And Russia, sorry.
Yeah. And apparently the United States, but I'll believe that when I see it. The answer is very boring. The answer is I had no involvement whatsoever, not even to approve the deal.
Why?
Well, that's the more interesting. In a way, that is quite interesting, because it seemed at the time so impossibly hard to imagine writing the show and getting it put on television in the UK. That the idea that you then have this problem, this lovely problem of a remake in another country, let alone several remakes in several countries. We just didn't think to really include that in my deal. And yes, I get a share of profit and what we call change of format. But I don't have any approval rights, and the deal, that bit of my deal was
even at the beginning. I mean, did you approve the deals or?
No.
No.
Oh, did I approve my own? No, you mean?
I mean the fact that the format has been sold to other broadcasters abroad. No?
I've got absolutely no rights in that at all, and obviously I wouldn't do that deal again. But listen, what you have to understand is I thought the show would not be made. ITV didn't want to make it. They passed on it. I'd spent 9 months or something writing first one episode and then the second, and I was so sure it was a good project, and they passed on it. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, I've just really made a very bad judgment on this project and it's not going to go. ITV have said no, and now I need to start with a new project for next year, which means we've gone 2 years with no money. I think £10,000 or something. So we sat in our garden and we looked at our very nice house, which I'd bought with money from the Americans when I was doing Hallmark, the stuff that nobody ever saw. I had this huge house, and we sat in the garden, and I said, I think the house has to go. And there was a very bleak two-week period where, I just thought, I've got to pick myself up and start again, and every writer in this room will know what that's like. And then out of the blue, ITV rang up and said, okay, we'll take your show, but does he have to be so grumpy, the doctor? He said, thank you for taking it, he does have to be grumpy, that's the idea, there is no other idea.
Okay, and Robin Hood has been very well sold internationally. For this show, did you follow the sales, or not at all?
Yes, no, on that show, because I was involved in finding the co-production, the top-up money, so deciding to go with BBC worldwide, and we established a good relationship very early on. They're fantastic, actually. They're brilliant. For that kind of show, they really knew how to do it. and I guess you would know that because you bought it from them.
Yes.
And they would, were always reminding us of the commercial angles on the show, and they would, if they made a good sale, they would drop us an email to say, you'll be really pleased to know that the French loved it, and they paid us some money, and you know, millions and billions of pounds were talked about, none of which ever came into my pocket.
Too bad. Okay, and Dominic, could you tell us what you're working on right now with your production company? What are you looking for? What are you still involved in writing series?
Yes, it's a kind of mixed answer. I had this all beautifully planned out. My iPad's gone dark. Yeah, so I have this production company called Island Pictures, and I'll show you in a minute a little trailer of our forthcoming film, which is an adaptation of a Daphne du Maurier novel called The Scapegoat, which was written and directed by a fantastic guy called Charles Sturridge, who is a name you might know because he, as a very young man, got this great job writing and directing, going out of my head, Brideshead Revisited, and which is, you know, a landmark show for us. And he's done a grand job with us on The Scapegoat, and we're very proud of it. And
maybe we can see the trailer.
We'll show you a trailer in a second, just to finish the answer to your question. And so that's our first production out of the gates, as we say, in London. And it's something I haven't been involved in the writing of or the directing of. That's so some of the projects I'm writing, and some I'm not. And we've got, I'll give you a flavour of our slate. So we've got a British series about a foreign woman cop working in the UK, which we're quite excited about, early doors on that one. We've got a show that I'm writing, which is about somebody who gets involved in legal cases whilst being inside prison. And it's a kind of conspiracy thriller.
It's a new genre for you.
I suppose so, yeah. And I'm writing and directing a film with some British and German partners, which is it will be my directing debut, which is a film about a girl who goes to work as the housemaid in the Tuscan villa of Puccini, the composer, in 1903, which I'm really excited about. We've got a romantic comedy, which is also a film which is written by, in co-production with Australia, written by a stand-up comedian, lady comedian in Australia, and more series, more. You know, what we need to do is more to pay all our bills and overheads, and keep my son on Final Cut Pro. We need more shows like Doc Martin for the British market.
I hope for you.
Thank you. So we'll show you a little 2-minute clip, which is not edited by my son, but by our distributors.
Est-ce que vous avez des questions, certains?
Have you ever seen the French version of Doc Martin, and what do you think of it? Oh.
I'm really embarrassed to say I haven't seen it. I was really excited when I saw it had done very well. Are you the producer of it? I know the producer is here somewhere. It's a woman with red hair. Yes, I'm looking for a lady with red hair. I know it did really well on its first night. I was really thrilled. And my partner is now a producer with me, but she was a casting director for many years. And she said, that cast is incredible. You're so lucky that in your show in France they've got those actors. So I felt very proud, very pleased. But I think it wasn't. I tried to, look at it illegally on the internet, and I couldn't find it. And then other things took over. But maybe if I find the mysterious lady with red hair, she might give me some DVDs.
Someone see her? D'autres questions?
You obviously have been involved in many international co-productions, is that right? You worked with the Americans, you worked with other countries before?
Yes, I found the Americans very nice to work for, actually. People said to me, why would you do that? They'll eat you for breakfast, and I found them really straightforward and lovely and enthusiastic. And in Britain, sometimes pushing the ball up the hill, sometimes on your own. There's a kind of English reserve, which the Americans definitely don't have. Robin Hood was a co-production with BBC America, but they were, again, very easy to work with.
But my question is, how do you think, is it possible to maintain the voice of the author with so many people involved, you know, when you have a co-production, as it is a new trend coming?
I think, yes, so the question is, how do you keep the voice of the author when there are co-producers involved and lots of people involved internationally? I think, well, I've been lucky because the international partners have not been very invasive. So, for instance, BBC America really didn't say anything about the scripts. Their only note was, could we have actors with better teeth? You know, please don't have too many British toothed actors. I think the truth is that one shouldn't be frightened of more players being involved, because if you're in the middle, in the room where the decisions are being made, and there are more voices, then it's easier in a way for you to get your vision through. You know, if there's a lot of voices, it's harder when there's one other person or two other people. Then you've got to keep having the argument with them. But if you can just be the guy who, in the end, is the funnel for all those decisions, in some ways, the more voices, the easier it can be.
Do you feel that the creation of DTT in England a few years before France and a bigger satellite market really created opportunity for writers? Here, there are very often new channels, but the DTT providers or channels are very small budget and don't really invest enough to pay for drama or genuine scripted programming. And what happened in the UK, because you often refer to ITV or BBC, but is there some other providers of money for writers?
Yeah, so I think the question, succinctly, if I've got it right, is who else is in the market apart from BBC and ITV, and what about the satellite broadcasters? So Sky, we also have BBC Two, we have Channel 4, and
the more recent broadcasters, did they create a new market for?
And did they create is there a new market emerging and opportunities for writers? I mean, the short answer is Sky are very busy. They seem to have a lot of money, and they're commissioning like Billio, and they're poaching the commissioners from BBC to go and, so they're taking their relationships with them. So I haven't made a show for Sky, but I know everybody there and they know me, and they've got money. So yes, it's interesting. I think at this point they're quite limited in what they can do because they're in the business of selling set-top boxes. That's what they do, and they've sold them to all the people who are going to buy them, which is mostly guys who like sport.
They are pay TV.
Yeah. So now what they need to do is try and extend their reach with new shows that they can demonstrate are local. So you know you can get The Simpsons on Sky or Dexter. You know that. So all the people who wanted to get those shows first have already got the set-top box. And what they need to do now is to try and extend that to a new market. So they want it to be very British and to be able to put a big poster up on the A4 flyover into London with this show, and you can only get it on Sky. It's not particularly international, though they do have an international arm as well, Sky Atlantic. So it's a very specific brief, is what I would say, and perhaps there's at the moment a lot of excitement and not necessarily a lot of delivery yet. And it's hard to see how it will improve things, but it's certainly fantastic to have more than 2 players in the market. But at the same time, Channel 4 has become harder, and much more limited in what they can do. So, and same with drama on BBC 2, that's contracted. So overall, the picture is not necessarily so much better than it ever was, really. No, I think it's as hard as ever to be a writer, and it's certainly very hard to break in now. And I've got, as part of my scheme for the next show that I show run, I've got some writers who want to work with me and I want to work with them. But they are untried and untested. And they can't get work. They're waiting for me to get the right show, and then I'll introduce them to the broadcasters. Maybe we can do something. But it's very hard for young and not so young writers, who I think are really good, I know are good, to get their careers off the ground in the current market, if I'm honest. And that's, in some ways, that's the downside of the sort of the new rise of the writer in production, is that it means the pool of, it means that there's a few writers working quite a lot, and the new blood coming through is quite a lot harder, very limited opportunities. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's a bit muddy, but it's the answer.
What got you in this whole industry once you got out of school?
Well, I had the privilege of a brother who was a writer, whose jacket I'm wearing, I miss him very much. And we were very close, and I stood by him while he was developing his own writing career. And so I thought, I don't want to do that, it's the last thing I'll do, because he's doing that, he's really good at it. And then, so I tried working in commercials, and it wasn't for me. And so I realized that after I'd finished university that I needed to go and teach myself to write. So I went and hid in a dark room for a lot of years and wrote scripts that were no good and taught myself what worked and studied. I did my sort of a home course, and I did things like recording my favorite films onto audio cassette so that I could learn how the script worked without the problem of the images in the way, and I just did everything I could do to try and teach myself. And then, of course, nobody wanted to give me a job as a writer. I had to muscle my way in through the back door by befriending somebody, and it was a rubbish route to a career. It took too long, but at least it worked, which is more than I can say for some of the people I know who are just as good as me at writing.
You've been talking a lot about the collaboration with commissioners and producers. I wonder, when do they inspire you? When do they squeeze out does it happen that it squeezes out the potential in a story? And how do they do it?
Yeah, I think collaboration is a funny word for a writer, isn't it? Because we have to be collaborative. And what I think collaboration tends to entail is you write a script and somebody else in a meeting collaborates all over your script. I think when you find somebody who's inspiring anywhere in life, isn't it just incredible, and you want to be near them. And it has happened to me that I've felt enabled by colleagues. I'm not sure necessarily. I mean, you feel the enthusiasm when BBC One wanted Robin Hood, because it was absolutely right for what they wanted to do. That's why I did it, actually, because they really wanted it. You could feel the electricity in Broadcasting House. You know, they were excited. I think for me, what's more valuable is when you're in a hole, you're in a corner with something, and you can't see. Everything suddenly is bleak, and you're tired, and then you need somebody who knows what you're doing well enough and knows you well enough to say, you know what, actually, couldn't we do this? And if anybody else said it, you go, no. But this guy says it, and you think, well, actually, okay, we're in a hole, we've got no time, we've got 7 days, the actors are all unavailable, we could put these 2 guys in a cave, which did happen to me on Robin Hood. We got, well, let's put Robin and Marion in a cave, we'll get 2 bits of black, I mean, it was like this, and we'll shoot an episode that way, and then we can afford to do it. And actually, sometimes those are the most interesting challenges, but you need somebody who's on your team to say, come on, you can do it. And I've had a couple of examples. Foz Allen was one. Scott Meek, who was the brilliant exec producer of many shows, including Inspector Morse, but also the one I showed you clips from of Bobby Carlyle in Hamish Macbeth, was one of those guys who would say, you're in a hole now, but you can do it. Come on, I'm going to give you 5 ideas, and one of them is going to work. And that's lovely, yeah. Not very often. No.
Quelle est la place du directeur de la photo, la confiance qu'on accorde au directeur de la photo et le travail? Est-ce que le travail se fait en amont avec le scénariste ou avec le showrunner, ou comment s'installe la confiance ou le travail en commun avec le réalisateur et le producteur?
I think a showrunner's relationship with a cinematographer is as good or as bad as you want it to be. I'm not sure. You could probably ask 5 different showrunners and they'd give you 5 different answers, but it seems to me the proper, the way it should be, is that the look of the show, the shooting style, the colour palette, the faces, the choice of camera, which I was very interested in. I'm interested in cameras. And, you know, do we shoot digital? Do we shoot high definition? If we shoot high definition, at what resolution? And then, of course, all those conversations that then become embroiled, which we did on The Scapegoat. Can you afford to shoot at the maximum resolution of the camera? Because if you shoot at max res, you need masses of data storage, and then you're running back and forth from set to the cutting room, because you're trying not to spend another £500 a day or whatever it is for this disk drive, and it's cheaper to send a courier, send a driver, but it becomes a cost conversation as well as a creative conversation. But yeah, I mean, the point of being a showrunner is that you get across the piece consistency of vision. So you want to say, you'll have seen The Scapegoat. We worked hard to make it November-y, atmospheric, grey. The conversations about colour palette are important, and if you're involved in hiring the key director, the first director up in a series, you want them to present themselves well, so you take them to a meeting, and you'd have a creative meeting with the broadcaster, and you'd interview people beforehand and say, how would you've read the script, how are we going to make it look? And so their choice of cinematographer will often be an informed one, and something you want to be involved in. But it's, in a way, it's whether you trust the director or whether you want to get involved. And it's the same with other key personnel, obviously, and makeup and wardrobe. And I found all that, for me, really part of the show, and it feeds back into the writing. The most obvious one is the music. So I really enjoyed working with our fantastic composer on Robin Hood, and made him give me some music that I could use to work with. So when I was writing during production, I had real music from the show. And that was a really big deal, and it's something my brother used to do when he was filming. He'd have his composer start before they were turning over, doing themes and little pieces on the piano, so that you could play that to the actors. You can, it's Scorsese.
Inspiring.
Gets involved. Yeah, and it's those things are available to you. I don't know why you wouldn't want to embrace them. Yeah.
Thank you. D'autres questions?
In France, we are always astonished by the quality of the UK shows, because there is a lot of creativity and boldness compared to the French shows, which are more conventional. So my question is, are the broadcasters, do the broadcasters give a lot of freedom to the writers in the UK. When you propose to them a screenplay, do they green light it, or do they ask you to trim some aspects? How does it work?
They value a certain, some writers' names attached to a project, whether be it an adaptation or an original, will make them sit up and listen. And some writers, I think there's also a graph for one individual writer. They'll be in favour 1 minute and down the next, and you just have to accept that sometimes you're in demand, and sometimes anything you say is a fantastic project, and sometimes you've got a fantastic project and they're not really listening, and that's just a kind of fact of life of the business, and it's not worth taking personally. But no, I think no project is ever greenlit without a writer that the broadcasters know being involved and having come to see them and have a conversation with the whites of the eyes. Here's how I think we should do it. And then, of course, actually written a script or 2 or 3 so that they can see what they're going to be commissioning. Are there any bits of that that's surprising? No. Different from the French system.
Well, sometimes the writers, in France, they complain that the broadcaster trim the screenplays and sterilize the original work.
That never happens in the UK. No, there's a lot of unhappy people who say they went into commission to pitch a comedy drama, and they came out with a commission for a sitcom, and it was ruined. And of course, we've all got those stories. And the job is to try and hang on. I think the job is, you can use all that energy to complain and be unhappy, but in the end, only you will be unhappy. And the job is to try, I think writing, and actually all creative activity, but particularly writing because it's something that you do on your own, it is about trying to not listen to the voices that say this is no good, I can't do it, people don't want me, and to keep saying here's how we can do this, and keep trying, and just come back again the next day, again and again and again, year after year after year, and to still be good, and keep, still be coming up with fresh stuff. And of course it happens all the time. And I'll give you this is a really true story. As I used to say that writers shouldn't be allowed in a room together. I used to work at the Writers Guild and the council. These writers together, they just moan and complain. And I once went so far as to say, I could tell you in a room full of ordinary people if there was a screenwriter in that room. And one day it actually happened. About 2 years ago, I went to a party given for, by the parents of one of my kids from school. So it was an audience of civilians. It was, normal people. And we came into this party, and there were several levels, and in the far corner of the kitchen, poking the cheese, was a screenwriter. And I'd never met him. But I said to my partner, see that guy down there? And sure enough, and I made a line, I got through the party, and he was a screenwriter, and he was really unhappy. And I think that for us all, we have to know that's true about ourselves, and thank God if anybody wants to live with us, and be happy and try and use positive energy to get work commissioned.
Did he recognize you as well?
He was too busy poking the cheese.
D'autres questions?
How different is writing a series from writing a film?
Well, I haven't written many singles, to be honest with you. Well, that's not true. I've written a few and they've been variously unsuccessful, or the rights tied up. But I think the answer is obvious if you think about it. In a single piece, by and large, your narrative and your character need to meld, so that your character starts out standardly with a problem, and the story gives him an opportunity to go and do something about that problem, and he's heading towards that problem and solving it. And just before the third act kicks in, he realizes that it's not there that he needs to go, and you knew that, you sort of got there just ahead of him. And he goes, oh, I've been shooting for the wrong thing all this time, and actually I'll go this way, and then they get together at the end. And the narrative and the character evolves is the short of the story. So the narrative needs to help the character get to where he needs to go, standardly, in a single. And in a series, the opposite, I think, is the case, which is you need your characters pretty much to be the same guy week in, week out. They don't change. And the audience doesn't want Doc Martin to be happy next week. They want him to be grumpy again this week, but in another way. So the story changes every week, but the characters stay quite rigid. But you don't want to feel that they're stuck in aspic. You don't want to feel that they're a construct. So you want to feel they're still alive, and you have to move them on a little bit. But you do that glacially, really, really slowly. You know, so a relationship forms across a series and may or may not come to something by the end of series 1, or you might tease the audience and go to series 2. That's how slow series are. They're almost like real relationships in real life. Whereas in a film, you fall in and out of love and meet your right partner and live happily ever after in 90 minutes. So it's a completely different skill. But it's interesting because I found that working with inexperienced producers, they feel anxious about the show being the same this week as it was last week. What can we do that's different? So you're carefully constructing a world that can last for 5 years or 7 years if you're lucky, which involves all these sort of stable pillars of characters and setting. And they're thinking, we better mix it up, because otherwise we're not doing our job, we're not adding value, and that's about producers needing to put themselves, their stamp onto, and feel like they're writing. And actually it's a dangerous place to be, but it's something you have to hold your ground and hold your nerve with as a writer when you're writing a series, and just remember the shows that have worked for you, by and large, they stay roughly the same from week to week at least, even if there's an evolution across season 1, season 2.
Yes, about the place of the characters in the exercise of writing a series, Pascal Brugnot was saying about the adaptation, so the strange woman with red hair that you wish to meet. So she was saying like an hour ago that in the adaptation of Doc Martin, after 1 season, the characters have completely gained power. They have become the essential ingredient in the magic recipe of Doc Martens. And she believes that now we end up with like 20% only of the original specificity of the UK in this series in the French version. She was saying that she was actually comparing the characters as Astérix, the famous French resistance, because the series takes place in Brittany, in a small village. So my question is, do you dedicate your whole sadness to thinking of the capacity of the characters to gain the heart of the public when you write?
I think there's a lot there, and tell me if I don't quite answer the right question, won't you? But is it to do with, if I practice your question, then I might get my answer right. So your question is, how invested how careful I am with the characters?
Yes.
Because I want the public to love them.
Yes, do you think this is the best, like the most important ingredient in the success of the series?
Yes.
The characters, I mean, the capacity to be, sincere and to gain the heart of the public.
Yes.
In their constantness, what you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's 2 things going on in a series like Doc Martin. One is situation, and the other is character.
Okay.
And I think it's easy, and I know of examples, and I won't bore you with them, but it's easy to create a series based only with the situation, and to forget that you need a character. And that's the standard maneuver, is you have a fish out of water So I'm thinking of, there are loads of, it's a standard thing, so Northern Exposure. Did you ever see that show? American-Canadian show. But often you will take an ordinary guy, which is us, which is the audience, somebody like me, and put him in a strange world with small-minded, quaint characters, pretty locations, light-hearted stories, which all go well in the end. And your characters, your central character's job in that scenario becomes, to a certain extent, just to go, huh? Like that. A kind of what the fuck acting. And to a certain extent, we were guilty of that. I think I can say now, it's been a long time. We were guilty of that in Hamish Macbeth. Hamish Macbeth's character spent a lot of time going, when the locals got up to their silly tricks. And I didn't want to repeat that when I did Doc Martin. So I decided to forget the scenario for a minute and just think about a character who could be interesting. And so I came up with this character who is pathologically grumpy and who wants to be a fantastic doctor, who at some level in his heart knows he has no bedside manner and that he wants to connect. And so he takes himself away from a job and the big city to be in a small community because he knows at some level that he's broken. And so it was a very deliberate and conscious choice to create a character who is not spoken, but you know, and everybody knows that he knows he has something wrong with him. And he needs to try and get this community to help him to fix it. And so I think every time he says something silly like, you know, I can't think, you know, that looks like a melanoma on your breast, instead of hello, pleased to meet you. You think, oh no, look, he's done it again. But actually you also know that really he wishes he hadn't said it. So you laugh at him, but you feel for him at the same time. And I tried to build that into the DNA of the show. So yes, and I wanted, the phrase I had at the time was, the character needs to be at least as interesting as the world in which he finds himself. So to try and move away from twee, to patronize country bumpkins, but actually they're much less broken than he is. So that was the choice that I made.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions? The last one.
As a writer, how would you end the series?
How would I end which series?
Any series.
Any series? I don't know. You never want to end a series. You want to keep it going forever. I don't think that's true, actually. I think sometimes you can make something. I felt that Hamish and Beth should have stopped at 2, certainly had finished by series 3. I finished Robin Hood after 2 series. I didn't do the 3rd series because I felt I had no more to give, and it was expedient, for reasons I won't go into, to kill off some characters. And so I wrote the death of Marion, which for me was a very moving, it was so symbolic of my own departure from the series. And a lot of people gave me a very hard time because they felt you couldn't kill Maid Marian. A lot of teenage girls were very angry about it. So that's the nearest I've come to consciously writing an end of something, but even that wasn't the end of a series. I don't know, it's always sad. Everybody's very sad when a show comes to an end, and quite often, as you can imagine, they're in denial about it, and it hasn't finally been decided, so many series aren't ended, because everybody wants the possibility and the faintest hope that it could come back and we could all work together again. So what you get as an audience is shows that very rarely come to a conclusion. That's a shame. It's a really good question, actually. We should always plan properly the ends of our series and sort of bite the bullet, and the creators should be brave enough to say that's the end now, we're stopping. Good question.
Thank you. And it gives me a good transition to end this masterclass. Dominic, thank you very much for sharing your vision.
Thank you for having me.
Merci beaucoup.